Authors in Japan often use dialects found across the country to help illustrate their characters' backgrounds. Now, I've already talked about Goku's, and today, I wanted to talk about the Japanese dialects and speech patterns of other characters like Chi-Chi, Yajirobe, and Vegetto, and Gogeta. Let's start with Chi-Chi. She mainly uses standard Japanese, with a lot of Tohoku dialect here and there, to help illustrate that she grew up in the most rural and off the beaten path possible, like Goku. Tohoku is very much what Japanese natives think of when they hear the word country. According to the Japanese National Tourism Organization, the Tohoku region of Japan is home to unspoiled rural landscapes and historical treasures, outdoor summer adventures, and endless powder snow in the winter. So Toriyama probably picked the Tohoku dialect for Chi-Chi because it perfectly captures her upbringing. As someone who grew up on Mount Frypan, a small village ruled by her father, the Ox King. So what does the Tohoku dialect sound like? It's described as much slower, softer, and quite different compared to standard Japanese. Many natives say it's hard to understand. In fact, oftentimes subtitles are needed when newscasters interview people in Tohoku because the dialect is just that different compared to standard Japanese. As an example, here's how to say I am your cute friend in standard Japanese. 私はあなたの可愛い友達だよ. In Tsugaru Ben, a dialect found in Aomori, it would be Wawana no megoi keyakuja. Very different sounding, right? Now let's take a look at the scene where Chi-Chi first meets Goku. Both Goku and Chi-Chi use ora, which is the country version of the masculine pronoun ore, and they also use ome, which is the country version of the informal and masculine pronoun omae, the second personal pronoun meaning you. Now let's take a look here. Goku uses the da ending, which is typical for standard Japanese when speaking casually with other people, but Chi-Chi uses dabe, which is a sentence ender like da, but often used in the Tohoku region. Other things that you might be able to pick up is when Chi-Chi uses honorifics. She calls Goku Goku-sa, not Goku-san. What's interesting to me though is that Gohan didn't actually inherit any of Goku or Chi-Chi's dialects in both the anime and in the manga, which is kinda interesting. He speaks in a very standard Japanese, and so does Goten. Now let's talk about Yajirobe. In the anime when he first appeared, he spoke standard Japanese, as he did in the manga. But as the anime progressed, Yajirobe developed a Nagoya accent. And here's why. Akira Toriyama wanted Mayumi Tanaka to voice Yajirobe, but Tanaka was already voicing Krillin by the time he was introduced. But nonetheless, she was cast as Yajirobe anyway. In fact, even in the manga, there's a scene where Goku tells Yajirobe, "You sound like my friend Krillin." This created one problem, however. Whenever Yajirobe and Krillin were in the same scene, they sounded exactly the same. Mayumi Tanaka decided to give Yajirobe the Nagoya dialect to create a distinction between the two. And why the Nagoya dialect? Well, some theorize that it's because Akira Toriyama's from Nagoya, but I think it's a lot more simpler than that, because the Nagoya dialect is a dialect commonly heard in Japan. Unlike the Tohoku dialect, the Nagoya dialect can be heard in a lot of mainstream media, and it's still very similar to standard Japanese. Many Japanese natives often describe the Nagoya dialect as cat-sounding, like the U word is not omae or ome, but omya, which sounds like nya, the equivalent of meow in Japanese. And it's kind of funny because Karin doesn't have the cat speech most fictional feline characters do. He doesn't say nya or meow at the end of his sentences. So Yajirobe sounds more like a fictional cat than Karin does. And Karin just sounds like an old man. Not a sage-sounding old man, just an old man. Okay, let's talk about Vegetto. His speech takes cues from Goku, and I'd say maybe some of Vegeta's speech patterns. For instance, when he first transformed into a Super Saiyan, he used the word koitsu to refer to his transformation. The same way Goku used koitsu when referring to his transformations. He could have used kore, which is a more common way of saying the word this, but he used koitsu instead, which is a preference thing. In episode 66 of Dragon Ball Super, Vegetto's way of talking becomes more Goku influenced when he starts using ome instead of omae. Now, I know the majority of Vegeta's name make up Vegetto's name, but the fusion character is barely inspired by his way of talking. I didn't have a section talking about Vegeta's speech pattern, but now is a good time. For the most part, Vegeta speaks normally, but with a big dollop of pride. What do I mean by this? Well, the way he conjugates his verbs. Instead of saying something like iranai, he'll pronounce it iran. Instead of saying kikenai no ka, he'll say kiken no ka. This way of shortening these verbs is thought of as royal sounding in the word of yakuwarigo or role language. He'll also use words like kisama or yaro or yatsu, things Japanese language teachers will tell you not to say. Words that refer to someone very disrespectfully. But other than this, he speaks in standard Japanese. But there is one thing that stuck out to me. When he first appeared in Dragon Ball, he said a word that is akin to Old English, and I'm talking about this word. Hearing this, it was kind of like hearing Doctor Strange use the word hitherto in Infinity War. This morotomo word means together with or along with. And I've only ever seen it appear in classical Japanese literature, and barely in any modern text or fiction, like this one Yu-Gi-Oh card. But after the Saiyan saga, when Vegeta became a main character, he didn't really use many classical words anymore, which kinda bums me out since that would have been an interesting trait to have. Going back to Vegetto, he barely inherited any of this. He uses omae and not kisama. I mean, Vegeta uses that too, but there's barely any hint of crudeness in Vegetto's way of talking. Now for the Gogeta fusion. He's a very interesting case. When he first appeared in movie 12, he spoke with standard Japanese, very masculine but nothing out of the ordinary. And he only had a brief few lines. But in Dragon Ball GT, he used the ome second personal pronoun that Goku uses, similar to Vegetto in episode 66 of Dragon Ball Super. Both versions of the character also had the same intro line, I am neither Goku or Vegeta, I am he who will defeat you. In the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, his speech pattern is back to just being standard Japanese, but with a slightly rewritten intro line. And he also doesn't use ora or ome, he just uses ore and omae. I mean, he still sounds cool, just wished he used ora to contrast Vegetto. And lastly, here's a bonus. Number 13 does not have the equivalent of a trucker hat accent in Japanese, not even a dialect.